What's up YouTube? Welcome back to Homebrew Subaru. Today I'm going to start under the hood of the Forester. There's a lot of rust that needs to be taken care of, but before I can really even get to it, a lot of parts need to come off and get out of the way. So obviously a lot of the stuff that's on the left side or the driver's side needs to come out. The washer bottle, the fuel filter need to come out anyway. It's getting changed. The AC line I kind of found is actually rotted right into two pieces. So I'm pretty much going to eliminate the AC. I don't really need it. There may be a point when I'm traveling in the summer where I do, but yeah, and I might regret it. I'm definitely not putting AC in it now. So the low side line, which is actually in reusable shape, I'm actually probably going to cut it and pinch it off, and the same with the high side line. And that way it'll likely save the evaporator if I ever intend on using it again. And well, you can see here, the bottom set of fins is actually rotted completely off and disconnected itself from the system. So the condenser is really just harboring corrosion, and it definitely needs to come out. The exhaust manifold is being replaced with the headers, so that's got to come out and give me a little bit more room to walk around in here. But yeah, I'm going to start by getting all this stuff out of the way and then get to some of that rust. Well, with everything out of the way, we can see the extent of the damage. Obviously the battery tray is literally coming right out of there. Probably just going to trim around it and take it right out of there. I'm kind of wondering how I'm going to get a battery back in. Likely a battery box. I'm going to have to bolt a battery box here and let it sit inside. It looks a lot worse than actually what it is. The main rail is actually underneath this skin of metal. The skin actually wraps around the frame rail and then gets spot welded to the rest of the body, and then they go over top of it with body sealer. And you can kind of, I mean, you can't really see it over on this side because of the lines, but that's how I could determine it's in there. I think what I'm gonna do is lay a piece of angle right along the seam and stitch the rail back to the body and back to this metal back here maybe, and then just use another piece of like 2-inch strip, 1/8 inch, and come right along the front to kind of reinforce it, and probably make it in 2 pieces, because this is obviously going to be a crumple zone, and I think that's why that probably ends there, so that this can kind of fold up like an accordion. I don't want to have a great big long piece of straight metal going through the firewall and spearing me in the ball sack during an accident, if you know what I mean. Now, because this next part is so time consuming and dust is just going to be flying everywhere, I'm not going to bother filming the actual cleaning. I'll certainly turn the camera back on when I start measuring up some metal and thinking about welding some stuff in. Now, I don't know how many hours I spent doing this yesterday, but it was quite a few. Grinding all that out and wire wheeling it to the point that it was just down to the bare metal. It took a good portion of the day anyway. Decided to hit it with the rust converter and just give it a heavy application of the rust converter and let that sit overnight. But before doing that, I kind of started trimming up some metal pieces to figure out what I would need to weld in place, and I'm just kind of letting the heater actually heat up all the metal, and I'll move that stuff out of the way. We'll get a better look. So now you can really see how much of the area is affected. I applied a second coating of the rust converter down in here to try and eat up some more of that rust. So yeah, it's definitely penetrated into the metal. So obviously I need to get a patch of metal in here, and I've got this somewhat trimmed to size. And then of course this corner over here, I want to reinforce that a little bit. I'm gonna cut it this way. Just kind of stitch that piece into there. And then just because that battery tray is completely missing, kind of wanted to reinforce this area. So I think that piece of sheet metal will go in there. Now these pieces of angle, I did quite a bit of work to get them the way they are. I actually zipped along the back side of it here just so I could kind of change the angle of it so it would fit to the body a little better. And then I put these V-cuts in it so it'll go around the studs that are holding the cross member up, and I can pretty much bridge to that. I can put it across the back side here, and then because there's a little bit of a gap and a contour change, I decided, well, trim that piece right off, and I might have to make another little cut in here, but just kind of sink it in behind so I can attach it up to this little piece of metal. I'll probably blow holes in a bunch of stuff, but you know. And then I've got this piece of angle kind of trimmed lengthways. Give it a little bit of taper, and that should weld right up alongside the next one. Be able to weld it along the bottom here, and that should make things nice and solid. Time to get this heater out of here and bring over the welder. Well, here's the first section of it done. So I've got the piece of sheet metal in, and they are very solid. I've got these stitches going along here so I can kind of just hammer down these edges, grind it a little bit to clean up some of those welds, and then put the coating right over top, and that'll seal it all in really nice and keep it so that if I do have my hands down in here, I'm not going to gash them open on anything. Looking pretty medieval, but very structurally sound. I've got both these channels welded right across in the front, stitched along the sides on both ends, and then welded completely together. Some stitches at the end, and then even this little cross piece, I've got it welded completely to there. Some stitches across the bottom and across this plate to hold it right to the body and retain everything. And then over here I ground down the welds a bit and hammered it in. Before the undercoating can go on, I actually have to make a new bracket for this hill holder. So this is the mechanism that literally holds the vehicle on a hill when you put the clutch in so it doesn't roll back. And it's a mechanical deal on this Subaru. The bracket rotted right off the bottom of it, and it had a little stud that kind of went in here and bolted it in. So there's no way I'm going to get the bracket off the bottom of this. The bolts are just so heavily rotted that unless I disconnect the whole thing and put it on the bench and heat it and play around with it for a while, it's just not going to happen. So I've had the other idea of winding out one of these top bolts and then just making a new bracket that kind of wraps around it and goes underneath, and then welding that to the new metal. So I've got a couple little brackets. I'm going to try and rig something up and make that up next. That'll work. So here it is, actually a few hours later. I've let this set long enough that it's all hardened up. I really sprayed down into a lot of the seams to make sure that I have a really good airtight and watertight seal everywhere. And I mean, this chunk of channel in here is so strong. This thing could take a full impact, and that's just not going to let go. It's going to twist up and bind up in there. And then this little bracket for the hill holder, you could see I actually needed a little angled piece to bring it away from the body instead of spacing it with washers. And that little chunk of metal came right off one of those fuel rail protection things off that 2011 car. I actually held onto this metal just thinking, oh, it might make a bracket out of that or something. So that first piece is off of here, and then the bottom piece is just a leftover piece of the angle. And this guy is nice and solid. And to be honest, when I first saw the amount of damage in here, I really started to dread on how it was going to go back together. But it kind of looks like I know what I'm doing. Now, originally I had no idea how long that was going to take me. And yeah, I did spend quite a few hours on it. But fortunately, I had all of the supplies on hand. I didn't have to run out and get anything. And then just taking my time to cut all those pieces specifically to fit in there made welding it in so much easier and so fast. Coming to the end of it and spraying it over with that coating. Yeah, I know it's all there. You know it's there. But realistically, it's going to be unforeseen for a long time. In a similar situation though, and your Subaru had that sort of body rot, and an inspector actually did find it. Well, first of all, the engine's going to have to come out just to be able to do the repair. So you've got time and labor and maybe a few parts here and there just to get the motor in and out of the vehicle. And then the amount of time and supplies put into, you know, doing the actual structural work. Most shops, I'll tell you right now, will just turn that away. They won't even bother with it. They'll tell you that's the end of the vehicle's life and it's time to get a new one. What you could possibly work out with a couple shops is getting one shop to pull the engine out, having the vehicle towed over to a body shop and having all the work done, towed back over to the mechanic and getting an engine put back into it. It's gonna get expensive if you're into something like that and you have to get it done. When they tell you you might be at the end of the vehicle's life, they're just being honest. Now for me, I realize how different it is. I've been in this trade for 25 years. I've got a mass amount of tools, and really I've fixed fucking shit boxes that no one else would even look at. So if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here and you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below, and I'll see you in the next one.
Oh yeah, this is real bad.